April 27th. My name is Yvette Morris. After what happened today, I think I'm going to be keeping an audio diary. Hopefully I'll be able to keep it consistent enough for it to maybe be of some use to someone. Maybe help them solve this thing. I don't even know what it is, but it looks like something out of a horror movie. Let's just hope it can at least stay alive long enough to keep making these recordings. I wish I could start by explaining just what happened. Hell, I wish I understood it myself. All I know is that there are people walking around with their flesh dripping off their faces. I know I sound insane, but it's what I saw. It's almost like there were half-decayed corpses, but they were up and walking around. Not only that, they were eating people. I'm not crazy. I honestly wish I was. But if I were just a nutcase, then Mom and Brooke would still be alive. But Dad saw it too. And so did Nat. It was real, alright. As much as I wish it were just a dream or hallucination. I know I should explain exactly what happened, but I honestly don't want to. You wouldn't want to either. If it were your mother and sister who had been eaten alive in front of your eyes. It's hard enough knowing it happened, but reliving it just for the sake of a stupid diary. Well, I already made the commitment when I hit the record button, so here it goes. Spring break was about to end, so we decided to spend the last day of it hiking as a family. Brooke and Nat, my older sister and younger brother, didn't want to go. We had just gotten back from our vacation, so they wanted to relax and do nothing for one day before we had to go back to school. Mom made them go anyway. She said she wanted this to be something we did as a family. It was a stupid idea if you ask me. Vacation was so much hiking and running and swimming. I just wanted a day to do nothing. But I didn't complain like Nat and Brooke. I never complain anymore. Since I was diagnosed, I decided I would never make my family upset again. I can't ever see my mom cry like that again. We live fairly close to the hiking trails, so it wasn't much of a drive. I'll spare you the details of the hike, considering they weren't very interesting. But when we were coming to the end of it, that's when something happened. We were about to exit the trail when we heard a sound. We ignored it, figuring it was just a squirrel or a coyote or something. Totally normal in California, right? Well, before we could even step off the trail, someone came charging out of the trees and grabbed Brooke by the hair. She screamed, flailing and trying to escape from whoever had grabbed her. We turned around just in time to see what had appeared to be a man, but with chunks of his torso missing and hardly any flesh left on his face, revealing a sinewy, muscly, rotting mess that barely clung to bone, or just exposed in some places. We were frozen, too scared to even scream. If we hadn't frozen up like that, if I hadn't frozen up like that, then maybe we could have saved. But we didn't. The man, that's what he even was, took a bite out of my sister. She was screaming so loud. It was so horrifying. I don't think I've ever heard a scream that was so full of pain, so full of terror before I heard that scream of Brooke's flesh being ripped from her shoulder as the corpse bit into her. We were all terrified, but my dad was the first to recover. He tore a branch off a tree and beat the creature over the head till he let go of Brooke. Dad kicked the monster into the trees, lifted Brooke up from where she had fallen on the ground, and started screaming at us to run. I've heard him sound mad before, but this was something entirely different. He almost sounded scared. We did what he said and started running. But as soon as we reached the end of the trail, there were at least 10 more of those things. All we could do was turn around, but Mom was too slow. We were running back uphill, and they caught her. A whole bunch of them tore her apart, eating her as they did. I turned around and started running back to save her, but my dad grabbed me and made me keep running. I screamed at him to let me save Mom, but he said it was useless. I still argued, but my dad slapped me. I was in shock, but he started dragging me after him. Carrying Brooke, dragging me, and running uphill was becoming too much for my dad. I got my head back on my shoulders and kept running on my own, but he still couldn't keep carrying Brooke. She was bleeding too much, and it didn't seem like she was going to live. I tried to reach over and help him carry her, but I became distracted and tripped. I fell hard. Really hard. And that's the last thing I remember before I blacked out. When I woke up, my head hurt like a bitch. It took a minute for me to focus my vision, but when I finally did, I realized we were at the top of the hill we had been hiking near. We were surrounded by a formation of rocks, concealing us from the view of anyone who hadn't climbed over the rocks already. I sat up and looked around to see Nat in tears. He wasn't sobbing or screaming, which is really unusual for him. Then I noticed that one of his cheeks was bright red, as if he'd just been slapped. Then I understood. When I looked at my dad, I was in shock again. He was crying too. My dad? Crying? It seemed insane. It still seems insane. But the proof was right in front of my eyes. I looked at them, and I asked, what happened? Where are Mom and Brooke? I couldn't remember what had happened. They didn't answer me right away. In fact, they both looked away from me. I asked again. I said, where are Mom and Brooke? Still, they acted like they couldn't hear me. I was starting to get mad. Why weren't they answering? Something bad happened? I still couldn't remember what had happened before I fell. Where are Mom and Brooke? Dad finally responded. They're gone, Yvette. What does that mean? I asked him. It means they're gone. Gone how? Yvette, they're dead. As soon as I heard him say it, everything came back to me. I was so upset and angry. I tried to get up onto my feet to go smack my dad and make him tell me that it was all a lie. But I fell down as soon as I stood up. My legs suddenly filled with this insane pain. I looked down at them and saw that they were covered in scrapes and bruises. Still upset, I looked at my dad for an explanation. No. They can't be dead. I kept saying to myself, it's just some sick joke they're playing on me, that's it. But still, I wanted to know what had happened to my legs. You fell while we were running away from those things. My dad sounded so choked, so upset. I hadn't had any idea he could sound like that. He went on to tell me how they hadn't been able to wake me up, so they were left with the choice of either abandoning me or Brooke to carry one of us. Brooke was bleeding too badly, and it didn't seem like she would survive. So they ditched her and tried to carry me. but my dad was too worn out from carrying Brooke and running at the same time, so they had to drag me, him and Nat, together. Because of them dragging me, my legs ended up in this state. I knew they would probably be fine with a little rest, but they felt numb anyway. I was still trying to cope with this new realization. My mother and sister were dead. Why? Why had he abandoned Brooke instead of me? Even if she was bleeding horribly and had a chunk of her shoulder missing, my dad could have saved her if he'd just taken her up here instead of me. I fell onto my backside, still unable to process that they were dead. I can't even process it now. It's been hours since I woke up then. After an hour or so of mourning, I sat up and asked what the situation was. My dad told me to see for myself. I climbed up on one of the rocks that surrounded us and was astounded at what I saw. The view from here was normally beautiful, and it lasted for miles around. But scattered on the hillside were those same things that had killed my mother and sister. When I looked up to the city, few cars were moving, and many were crashed. Several buildings were up in flames. Even from here, I could hear the screams of several people which I hadn't noticed before in my grieving. This was happening everywhere. Maybe even everywhere in California. In America. Maybe everywhere in the world. I crawled back down, horror-struck. My dad nodded at me, understanding exactly what I had seen. I looked at him and asked, "Is this the end of the world?" Teary-eyed, he replied with, "I don't know." I didn't know what to say after that. For a moment, I considered climbing up on top of the rocks and throwing myself off. Even if the fall didn't kill me, those undead-looking monsters would. I only considered it for a moment, though. As soon as I thought of it, I realized it would be a horrible thing to do to my father and brother. They were suffering the same loss as me. It must have been especially hard on Nat, who was only 9. I could only imagine what's going through his head right now. How selfish would I have to be to kill myself just to escape from this nightmare and make their situations even worse? It's now 11:47 p.m. We're still on the hill surrounded by rocks. Dad made a fire. None of us have eaten. I'm going to leave the device I recorded this on in the spot where I'm going to sleep tonight. Thankfully, I had it in my backpack. If you find this, help us. I don't know where we're going next, but we can't be staying in one place for any long period of time, right? My name is Yvette Morris. I'm 13 years old. I think the world ended today.